Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the NMIS Insights into exploring micro-credentials. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel Moir. I am the Head of Skills Programmes at the Manufacturing Skills Academy at the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland. I hope, as I say, today you will find really interesting and useful to yourselves. Micro-credentials is something you've probably seen across many platforms recently, and it's another way of learning and in a way that we're exploring at NMIS and also with some of our partners as well. So today, as I say, we've got myself. I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to NMIS. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the work we're doing in the micro-credentials area. We've also got with us today Tommy Breslin, who is a Senior Development Officer at the STUC. Tommy has been involved in micro-credential delivery up till now and is going to talk a little bit about his experience and how you make that type of learning work. And finally, we've also got David Allen, who's a Partnership Manager at the Open University, who's going to talk a little bit about the work they've been doing in micro-credentials. Obviously, Open University has been working in that online space for a long time now, so there's a lot of good insight that they can give us from a micro-credentials point of view. So just a few points before we kick off. Just to let you know that this webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel once we're finished. Also, during the session, your microphones and webcams will be turned off just to avoid some of that background noise. But you can type any of the questions that come throughout the session in the chat tool. We're going to have a bit of time for Q&A at the end. So please just, when a question pops into your head, pop that in the chat tool at the side. As time for our questions at the end. There's also our usual social media channels, if you can use them for any questions or for linking anything that's there. And also, we'll send you a bit of a survey at the end. We'd be really grateful if you could fill that in for us, and that'll help inform some of our future sessions as well. So, just a bit of background on the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland, for those of you who haven't joined one of our webinars before. We're an industrial-led manufacturing research and development facility. We're trying to pull together the research groups, industry and the public sector together to try and transform the manufacturing industry in Scotland and wider in conjunction with some of our catapult centres as well. We're really trying to make Scotland a global leader in advanced manufacturing. So Scotland is this national resource set up to really advance manufacturing across Scotland. What we're looking to do, the aims of NMIS is we're looking to increase productivity, trying to reduce those barriers to innovation, getting academics and industry working really closely together to solve some of those industry problems. We're also looking to bring investment into Scotland and also increase our competitiveness through some of the research that we're doing and applying that to industry. We're trying to catalyse job creation as well and strengthen some of the supply chain links within Scotland. So we're really working on trying to get that whole ecosystem across the manufacturing industry in Scotland. The area that I work in mostly with the Manufacturing Skills Academy is very linked to that talent attraction, inspiring that future workforce, and make sure that we have the skills in place for what we want to do in the future, make sure we're taking full advantage of all those opportunities that Scotland has. We're trying to work with manufacturing businesses across the whole spectrum, all the way from SMEs right the way up to large organisations as well, and across the whole of Scotland. You know, we're not, yes, there's manufacturing across large amount of manufacturing across the Central Belt, but we are a Scotland-wide asset and really trying to bridge links across the whole of Scotland and make sure that Scotland, the whole geographical area of Scotland, is able to take advantage of what manufacturing has to offer as a sector. As far as the way we're set up in operation, you may be aware that we're operated by the University of Strathclyde, but we are a national asset across Scotland, and we are working with partners across all academic institutions in Scotland and across industry in Scotland as well. And you'll see from some of the work that we're doing in micro-credentials how that pans out as well, and some of the partners that we're trying to work with. Got a lot of support from across various funding partners, including the Scottish Government, all the enterprise agencies, Skills Development Scotland, of course, the wider catapult network across the UK, Renfrewshire Local Council, and also the Scottish Funding Council as well. So we really are this supported by the whole of Team Scotland as a national asset in Scotland. The way the group's structured, we do have a number of specialist centres that have been up and running and are very well established centres that you may be aware of already. We've got the Advanced Forming Research Centre and the Lightweight Manufacturing Centre, which are two specialist centres that have been running for quite some time and are now under the NMIS umbrella. Wider NMIS that we have, we've got the Manufacturing Skills Academy, which is where I sit. We've got a collaboration hub and a digital factory. And although our new building that some of you may be aware of, that's out near the airport, that's getting built just now, just look for the big purple roof. It's not quite finished. It should be finished by the end of the summer, but that's not to say that the Manufacturing Skills Academy and the digital factory are already up and running and there to provide support for you should you need it as well. But really, I say the whole National Manufacturing Institute Scotland is that Scotland-wide piece, and it's trying to make sure that network across Scotland and manufacturing is fit for purpose for the manufacturing industry. So what we're here to talk about today is micro-credentials. Now, we all know over the last couple of years there's been a huge shift in the type of the way that we learn, and we've probably moved faster than we ever have before in trying to pivot into particularly online learning. But we do know, and it has been even pre-COVID, we know that the needs of the learner have been changing and the way that we learn over time has been changing. We're now having to look at much more flexible ways of learning. We're having to look at people in work and how to upskill people that maybe don't have an awful lot of time to be able to actually take on training. So they've not got the time to do a standard 6-month, 1-year course anymore. We're needing to bring in a wider pool of people and a wider talent pool. And a lot of the traditional modes of learning are not accessible to that wider talent pool. So to push forward in equality, diversity and inclusion, we need to make sure we're thinking about learning in a different way and making sure there's lots of different methods and ways in which learners can access materials and learn. So learners, as I say, the needs of the learners really are changing, and we need to, all across the board within Scotland, within the skills development side, really need to take that on board and start developing new formats and new ways of learning. So one of the things that has come, and quite a number of organisations have started developing or delivering in this area, is this micro-credentials piece, which you may have seen the term used. What are micro-credentials? Well, in the name, it suggests it's small, bite-sized pieces of learning. So, for example, things that maybe could be done over a couple of days or a couple of hours that can be added together cumulatively to provide a really in-depth learning across the board. So bite-sized pieces of learning, so small chunks of learning that can be done at different times and fit into people's lifestyles. I've said micro-credentials are online. Certainly from the point of view of accessibility and flexibility, the majority are online as well, to make that access geographically as well. They're flexible. Again, I touched on with the bite size, the idea of micro-credentials is that it's not something that necessarily just happens on one day. It's something that the learner can access as and when they are able to do so and fits in with their lifestyle. It's accessible. Again, this kind of ties on to the flexible piece. You know, it's there, it's available 24/7 for those that maybe have caring roles or other responsibilities to be able to access learning. And even from a remote perspective, it means that they're able to access learning that may be presented by an institution, for example, in the Central Belt of Scotland, but those further afield can access that as well. The other important piece about micro-credentials is this recognised piece. So micro-credentials are either accredited by the delivery partner or accredited externally, so it's something that's recognised, and that's kind of really important. A lot of the feedback from online learning is that yes, it's great, but we'd like it to have some sort of accreditation or recognition. So the micro-credentials piece is this recognised piece, and also specialised, so small bite-sized chunks written by technical specialists in particular areas across the board. So what are NMIS doing in this space? We are looking to, as part of the National Transition Training Fund, which was funded by the Scottish Government and Scottish Funding Council, we are looking to launch our own 20 credit online qualification called the Digital Manufacturing to Net Zero, and hoping to launch in spring 2022. And the way this is put together is there will be a 10 credit piece, which gives that background for manufacturing fundamentals. And then there will be a suite of 2 credit modules, short modules, that the learner can choose to make up the rest of that 20 credit qualification. And it will be delivered through Strathclyde, but we are working in conjunction with a number of external partners because we're aware that, you know, to get the breadth of knowledge across the whole manufacturing sphere, you need to be utilising some of the strengths of our partners as well. So we're looking to work with University of Edinburgh and also University of Highlands and Islands to develop some of those 2 credit modules. So as I say, that will be launching spring 2022, and further information will come out over our channels as well. Okay. So as I say, hopefully that gives you a bit of a fly through of what micro-credentials are. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass you over to 2 people that have lived the experience of delivering and developing micro-credentials as well, and have a bit of insight. So I'm going to pass you over to Tommy Breslin from the STUC, who has gone through the process of working with members to deliver micro-credentials, and give you some of the insight into some of the extra bits you have to think about when delivering micro-credentials to a group of learners. Tommy.
Thank you, Rachel. I'll just call up my screen here. I've got a wee PowerPoint presentation here as well. I thought your introduction there was really helpful. So yeah, my name's Tommy Breslin. I'm a Senior Development Officer. I work for Scottish Union Learning, which is part of the STUC. So crucially, Scottish Union Learning supports trade unions in developing, organising and delivering work-related skills and skills programmes for their members that contribute to collective prosperity, fairness and equality for workers all across Scotland. So yeah, Scottish Union Learning is part of the STUC. And how do we go about this? Well, we do this through supporting trade unions to train and develop workplace union learning reps. So union learning reps are uniquely placed within their workplaces to understand the learning and skills needs of workers. They also have a unique understanding of employer skills needs within their workplaces. ULRs then work with their union learning organisers, which is essentially an employee of the trade union, to assess the feasibility of developing and delivering learning and skills programmes which are accessible to the workforce. I would add to that a little bit, you know, actually ULRs are elected by the workers within the workplace. So it's a really unique position that they hold. There's a strong element and degree of trust embedded within the ULRs that the workers are placed in them, and they negotiate with management, with the employer side as well, and they do that successfully. So they've got an understanding of the employer needs, and they've got an understanding of what the workers' needs are, crucially. And the union learning organiser, and I'm aware that we've got a couple of union learning organisers here today, so it's nice to see colleagues from RMT, the union, and also from PCS, the union, and anybody from any other union there as well. It's good to have you join us. So the union learning organiser subsequently engages with Scottish Union Learning, so that'd be myself or one of my colleagues, to source an appropriate learning provider that can deliver programmes of learning within workplaces that are at a time and day that ensures workers can attend. So if you think of night shift workers, for example, it's very difficult for workers on complex shift patterns, night shift patterns, to attend things like night classes. So a lot of those traditional models of learning can be really quite challenging for a number of workers. And we think about inclusivity and accessibility. Very often we're not thinking about some of those additional dynamics that sit around people's working lives. So the programmes that the ULRs and the union learning organisers and ourselves start to develop and really look at can be short, non-accredited half-day sessions. They can be short, non-accredited or accredited programmes that run over a number of weeks, or crucially they can be longer accredited programmes that run over the financial year. So we're pretty well equipped, I think, to be able to be adaptive to the different circumstances as they present themselves. And we're always looking at new models of engagement, new models of delivery, and new models in which we can support learners to get accreditation or training, and the micro-credentials obviously play into that. So we work with trade unions and learning providers such as New Battle Abbey College and Open University to accredit non-contextualised learning through things like the Adult Achievement Award or Making Your Learning Count. They're really important there. What we are keen in doing is organising and developing learning skills programmes irrespective of whether accreditation sits there or not, because we work at the demand based on the workers within the workplaces. And what we find is that people are keener to have accreditation than to not have accreditation. The courses, they're funded through Scottish Union Learning, so essentially we provide funding for bona fide trade unions. It's not just STUC affiliates, but it's bona fide trade unions in Scotland, so that's our remit. And we also support unions in accessing alternative sources of funding to support the development of workplace skills for workers, including negotiating with employers to better develop their workforce. So we look at things like the Workforce Development Fund, for example, and we negotiate with employers to access that. We look at the apprenticeship programme in Scotland, and we work with employers to grow, expand and take the apprenticeship programme across different areas of their business. So we're very involved in apprenticeships as well. I won't talk too much about apprenticeships here, however. And we work right across all sectors and industries right across the whole of Scotland. So learning online. In 2015, we worked with the Open Educational Practices Scotland project to look into online learning opportunities. And we organised workplace visits to speak to workers through OOPS, as it's called, to speak to workers about their experiences and thoughts around online learning. And we found that there were key considerations to be made when developing online learning opportunities, amongst which were access to appropriate IT equipment, including, when we think about it, you know, really, and it's come to the fore, really, a lot of these things have come to the fore throughout the pandemic. Households having one device, and that's got to be shared right across our household. So a laptop or an iPad, for example. Actually, this programme kicking off in 2015, there was a significant move to iPads, and that was a move away from laptops. So perhaps we were having greater access to some IT equipment, but the quality of the IT equipment in terms of being able to utilise it for things like online learning, I would suggest, is actually being reduced. You know, people are on their iPhones now as a handheld device, and I would say that's quite challenging at the moment. And the laptops replaced, essentially, people were having desktop computers in their homes. But also we found that digital skills, people not necessarily having the right digital skills to be able to access online learning opportunities, we started to work with unions to support people to further develop their digital skills. For a lot of adult learners, this will come as no surprise to anybody that works with adult learners, negative prior experience of learning has a negative impact on perceptions of online learning, as well as in-person face-to-face learning. So what we're finding there was where there was employer-led online learning opportunities that weren't particularly good online platforms, that this would put people off going back and studying in their own time, or having to engage through the employer around online learning opportunities where their previous experience had been negative. It really knocked people back. So that's a consideration we've really got to make when we talk about online learning. Access to the internet and the speed of connection is an obvious one, you know. And I know that there was a political party that were proposing that in December 2019 in the build up to the general election, that the internet and access to the internet should be looked upon as a public utility, and they're ridiculed for that. Lo and behold, a few months later, everybody was talking about it. Social learning we found as being a really important dynamic within online learning. And the online learning can very often be an isolated experience, but what we found was that learners wanted to come together and talk about their online learning. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this, how we were able to tackle that kind of sense of isolation. When we were looking at positive online learning platforms, there were two that really stood out, and that was OpenLearn and FutureLearn. I would actually add to that OpenLearn Create, very good platform as well, and right up there with OpenLearn and FutureLearn. But without shadow of a doubt, when we're taking it out to people and we're showing people online learning platforms, OpenLearn and FutureLearn were the two that came out streets ahead of anything else. And it would come as no surprise to know that both of these platforms were developed by Open University. Open University, formed in 1969, they have been the leaders throughout in terms of distance learning, and this experience in leadership has manifested in online learning opportunities and provision that Open University have been driving forward over quite a significant period of time. When we started to work with unions to support learners in developing skills online, we found that the social learning aspect, as I was saying, really came to the fore quickly. Learning really is a social experience. So in our experience, union-led workplace learning quickly develops communities of interest and communities of practice. And this interaction through these communities, this positive peer pressure and support, was something that we really did not want to lose when we're supporting learners to access free online learning opportunities through FutureLearn, through OpenLearn, for example. So we started to develop small self-organised study groups which could meet weekly to discuss the content of the courses and help each other through to successful completion of the programmes. And the kind of model is akin to a book group. So we think about a book group. The learners essentially would study at their own pace at a time and location which worked for them, and then they would come together every week at an agreed time and place. And as you say, you know, nobody sits around, it's a member of a book group and sits around in a circle and reads a book. They'll meet up weekly or fortnightly, whatever it happens to be, and discuss the book. And they will read the book in their own time at a pace that's relevant and works for them, and at a location that works for them. You know, we really find that this book group idea, this study group model, works really quite well. We worked further with Open University to start to dig into the OOPS project and some of the findings from the OOPS project, and we started to really look at the Open Learning Champions programme that Open University has got running. We started to train up not only Scottish Union Learning staff as a pilot, but we started to really engage with our union learning organisers and our ULRs and started to really develop them as Open Learn champions. And it really is something I would recommend to everyone. This training is for anyone that's interested in supporting learners to study open learning materials. But crucially, I would add to that, and I would say it's actually really about developing good study practices around studying online and how you're able, as an organiser of learning, to support learners through that online journey. You know, and thinking about things like curation comes through in that. Really important piece of developmental learning, I would say. The work with Open Educational Practices Scotland led to the development of short courses which actually now sit in the Open Learn Create platform, and these also are worth looking at. I'll provide my slides to NMIS, and I'll also put in as part of that some of the web links as well to the platforms that I've been talking about here, and I'll dig into that Open Learn Create platform a little bit. So my next slide. Online pivot. Okay, so here we go, the inevitable. So in February 2020, over 2 years ago now, I took a phone call from a ULR, a Union Learning Rep, at the Communication Workers Union, CW. CW essentially work amongst employers that are involved in communication. So the two big employers that you would think about there are probably BT and Royal Mail. You know, so the ULR was really concerned that an IT networking course, which was nearing completion, it was accredited, would be unable to finish properly, as the employer now was no longer allowing non-essential staff on site, and they were not allowing anyone that wasn't directly employed on site. So that created a real problem. If you're thinking about the models of learning that we've developed in non-pandemic times, essentially the learning takes place within the workplace. So we get a room that we turn into a classroom. So instead of the learners going away out and going to college or wherever else to study, that provision comes to the workplace. And sometimes that can mean that the learning providers have got to bring in, you know, a classroom in a box, you know, so it's a bank of laptops and, you know, access to the internet where the employer's got firewalls that are difficult to lower and whatnot. And we bring all of that equipment into the workplace to make things as accessible as we possibly can. So yeah, this programme, it presented a real dilemma for us. You know, it was nearing completion. The learners had been studying it for around about a year. What were to do? The learners were starting to feel, you know, they put a lot of time and effort into this, and the rug was about to be pulled from under their feet due to no fault of their own. You know, the finish line was on the horizon. And the college lecturers, I would say, we've got really good working relationships with all the colleges right across Scotland, and the college lecturers really engaged very well with our learners. They were concerned as well, as they'd worked with the learners over the same period, and they had them preparing to cross that finish line. So they had them built up to that level where they knew that very soon they were about to cross the finish line, get their accreditation, and been able to upskill and utilise those skills within their workplaces and potentially get a bit of promotion in their workplace. So there's a lot of pressure on. What I would say, we developed a strong sense of trust and effective delivery models between the college and the union over a number of years as the programme rolls from one year to the next with different cohorts of learners, and we've got a significant waiting list for that particular IT networking programme. The college worked with the ULR and the learners to organise a new model of delivery, and I was involved in that negotiation, and that was to be face-to-face via Zoom. With exams deferred until our awarding body and college were in a position to take this forward, which we were able to do. We did that quite quickly, to be honest with you, and we got everybody through to successful completion. The learners also met out each other virtually and established a WhatsApp group out with the tutor-led sessions. So we're developing a self-organised study group, a slightly modified version of the book group model that I had referred to earlier. The following week, another long accredited course with a different union moved in the same direction. So pulled in the same model to support learners through to completion of that programme as well. Again, successful completion, we didn't lose anybody. As we moved through into the new financial year, so we're starting to think of April 2020, that's when the pandemic really hit with the lockdown and so on and so forth. And we found that it was really necessary to develop the skills and confidence of our union learning organisers to redevelop their 2-year projects. The focus had clearly been on face-to-face learning within workplaces, but now very quickly we had to redevelop those courses to run online, and we had to develop the skills and understanding and knowledge base of the union learning reps within the workplaces and how they were able to engage with the workers as well through a virtual manner. We did that, and we did it through drawing on the shared experience of the OOPS project. We did it through regular online meetings to share good practice across our affiliates and to ensure that we developed our can-do and will-do mindset. We organised a series of webinars. I'd never participated in a webinar prior to then, let alone organise a series of webinars. And we worked with our Open University colleagues to draw on their vast experience and skill sets. And we organised new Open Learn Champions workshops, and we did that online. So again, we're back out to our union learning organisers, back out to our ULRs, start to look at our staff team as well, and start to really develop our Open Learn Champions sessions with our Open University friends. We spoke with our learning providers to ensure that there was no loss of quality. Now, at the start of the pandemic, that really was a recurring theme for us, from potential learners and also from the unions. You know, we've top quality union-led programmes delivered in workplaces right across Scotland in a face-to-face way. How were we able to look at that and say, actually, we've got to do this in an online environment, excuse me, in which we have no loss of quality? So there's a number of findings here, and I hope that as you listen to what I'm saying here, you can see how this model and this experience is transferred into how we're able to engage around the micro-credentials. So what we found, when we started organising learning online, that there was multiple benefits really. So workers were keen to continue to develop their skills during the pandemic, as there was concern about significant increases in redundancies. Okay, so that was what that really means was that we already have big waiting lists. Those waiting lists grew essentially, right? And we've got significant demand out there from workers and workplaces. We found that we could organise programmes which drew workers from a wider geography than would be possible for workplace situated learning programmes. Subsequently, we were better equipped to reach workers in remote communities. We were better able to organise programmes of learning which had low demand in some workplaces. We were better equipped to draw together cohorts of workers from multiple workplaces. So thinking of that spread of geography. Many of these involved in adult learning will probably have experience around developing programmes around literacy skills and numeracy skills, right? And the tendency for attraction, there's ways to do it, but the tendency for attraction is that those tend to be small groups of learners. And I'm talking about small groups of learners, I'm talking about 2 or 3 people, and that makes the feasibility of that when we're thinking about funded programmes quite challenging. There's got to be robust arguments. Actually, when we're starting to pull together different workplaces, we can see that we can develop literacy skills programmes in a better way with a small but larger cohort of learners, thus tackling any issues that sit around feasibility. We found, as I'm saying there, significant waiting lists started to really develop for a lot of the courses. We took a change in steer for the type of courses that we were delivering as well. Again, everything that we do is led by the workers within the workplaces. We really flip that table in terms of workplace learning, whereby workplace learning tends to be developed by management and they decide who's going on the courses, where the courses take place, when they take place, what level they're at, and so on and so forth. And we kind of turn that around and say, well, actually, what do the workers want to learn? And lo and behold, the workers want to learn skills that's going to help them within their workplaces. So I'd suggest that there's better engagement between management and workers, and that the union's the best vehicle, that effective voice of right thinking, fair work context, to bring workers and management together. We also found that actually through face-to-face learning and these study groups that we were developing, we were also tackling issues around social isolation in a very, very positive manner. Thinking back to the start of the pandemic, people were starting to talk really about social isolation, and there was an increase that we feel has happened throughout that in terms of people being concerned about their mental health. So we were able to make some inroads into bringing people together. Unions were able to secure release for workers to study and work in time, and they always do that within their workplaces. So they secure paid release for workers to attend. That actually increased. So during the first lockdown, we became aware of Open University development around the micro credentials. Yeah. And this was a chunky piece of learning pitched at SCQF level of 11, right, which was way above what we would normally be doing. Okay, so we're talking about upper levels as being SCQF level 7, where accreditation would sit. But now we're talking about SCQF 11. We had no support we had no experience of supporting learners at this level. So I selectively spoke to a number of union learning organisers about the online teaching, creating courses for adult learners programme. And not only have I been organising these programmes, but I put my money where my mouth was, and I studied the online teaching, creating courses for adult learners, micro-credential, as part of a small cohort of 4 learners. Clearly, the content was entirely relevant to the new context in which we all found ourselves. So I organised a small cohort of 4 learners to study this first micro-credential, and we organised an online study group to meet every Thursday morning to provide us with a positive peer support. And as the access to the course content is asynchronous, we all had full-time jobs and we all had other caring commitments and so on and so forth. We were all usually at different stages of the course, but that was okay when we were meeting in the study groups, and it was also further encouraging. So sometimes I would fall behind, sometimes I'd be further ahead than colleagues, and everybody else was the same within that group. But we all knew when the finish line was coming, and we all worked towards that, you know. The Future Learn platform in which the micro ran, it had discussion boxes for text-based interaction amongst the learners, and it was asynchronous tutor support through the same channel. And I got to say, the Future Learn platform is second to none. It's the best out there. It was absolutely brilliant. All 4 learners submitted their end assessment piece, and we had 3 passes with merit and 1 with distinction. So we did really well. And what we understood from that was that this idea, this book group model, this study group model, this social learning aspect, the dynamic that we were putting around it really, really worked. And I don't think any of us actually got any release, because as trade unionists we're also activists as well, and I think we tended to do all of our studying in our own time. So that was a different dynamic that's not automatically transferable, I would suggest, right across to your workforce. But we knew that the model worked, and we had 4 learners bagging 15 postgraduate points, so it was no mean feat. It was excellent. The second iteration of the programme ran later in 2020, and we had a second cohort of learners study the course. And the first cohort went on to study online teaching, evaluating and improving courses. And what I would say from that first cohort, there was of four people. As it happened, 1 was a part-time worker who had wanted to increase their hours, so got an additional days work, which was great. So there was a step for them that was very, very positive in terms of their working lives. 3 of the other learners changed their jobs. I got promoted in my job. 2 of the other learners took a step into more senior positions with different employers as well. So the success rate there was really, really high. I'm not saying that that's something we were necessarily looking for right across the micro-credentials, but what we can see there is the recognition of the impact of micro-credentials from employers there. It was really, really quite powerful. So for each iteration of the micro-credentials, we've utilised the same model, and our successful completion rates remain exceptionally high, with only 1 learner over the period having not completed, and this was due to a family bereavement. It's always going to happen that, you know, somebody drops out of courses. You can never expect 100% completion rate. there are exceptions, and I would say this is an exception actually, that we've had such high completion rates. It's phenomenal really, because we've supported between 30 and 40 learners at postgraduate level. Some are now studying as well at undergraduate level, right across a number of micro-credentials, some of whom had not previously studied at university level, but now have postgraduate micro-credentials at postgraduate points in their bag. The courses that have proven popular really with us are the online teaching suite, which now numbers 4. It's fantastic, and also Cisco cybersecurity, and then there's others that are picking up in some of the other programs of learning. We now actually have a small but growing number of learners that have bagged enough postgraduate credits to qualify for an open postgraduate certificate. And what we're finding, I know they were only 2 years into the micro-credentials, but not everybody's saying, right, I've completed that micro-credential, I'm moving on to the next one, and then I'm moving on to the next one, and so on and so forth. Some are doing that. There's a mixed model. Some are taking some time out and coming back in again, and others are saying, I've done the one that I want to do, that works for me in a workplace context, and that'll do me. I'll maybe look at something at some other point in the future there. But the experience that we've had has been absolutely excellent. I really encourage everybody to look at this. So I'll just kind of finish up with my final slide, and that is what happens next. Well, who knows? Because in January 2020, I'm not sure that many of us were thinking actually we're going to go into 2 years of being working from home, of lockdown. And I know that there are a lot of workers that have reported to their physical workplace throughout that period of time as well. What we think is going to happen is that as we move out of the pandemic phase, is that online learning will continue. We don't want to lose the good practice we've developed. We are happy to go with the wholly online with the support around the study groups to maintain that social interaction with each other. That cross geography really works in many ways. We think there'll also be a hybrid, which often is referred to in terms of a blended learning approach, which we think is really quite important. We think there will continue to be a series of webinars, and I hope that there are, because these again are great opportunities to engage with people right across Scotland in a very accessible manner. The fact that we can engage with them both synchronously and asynchronously is really quite powerful. Micro-credentials, I can only see a strong future for micro-credentials. Open University and colleagues or other institutions continue to develop their micro-credential programmes. It's great to see NMIS working with Strathclyde University, with Edinburgh University, with UHI. That's fantastic. So I think there's going to be a real growth there. I think we'll also look at micro-credentials appearing in other streams in which they're not currently available, but I think there's a real growth there. Conceptually, when we speak to people about them, there's a lot of warmth for micro-credentials. There's, and people will, it's definitely going to be an additional tool that we're going to be able to access as we move forward and move out of this pandemic period. And I'll just wrap up at that point and say thanks again to Rachel and NMIS for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I'm really passionate about this, and also to Open University for their support around the online learning that we've had over the years. Go back to the Open Learn Champions. Again, I would encourage people to really look at that, and I would also encourage you to really look at Open University's micro-credential offer and dig into future learning as well. And I'll just pass over now. Hope that gets seamlessly into to David from Open University. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you, Tommy, and thank you for those kind words about the Open University as well. Always appreciated. I'm just going to quickly share a slide deck as well. So just give me 2 seconds. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. So yeah, and also apologies, you're not able to see my lovely face on screen today, but I'm actually having some camera difficulties and technicals with the laptop, so you're just going to have to make do with my slides and my voice, I'm afraid. So yeah, I think the focus of the sort of next 10 minutes for me really is just to kind of build on and the narrative that's already been shared. I mean, obviously, as Fiona introduced at the start, the Open University has been in the distance learning space for quite a number of years. And laterally, over the last few years, micro-credentials has been an area of sort of growing interest for us, working in partnership with people like Tommy and other industry partners, which I'll come on to through the course of the next 10 minutes. So really what I wanted to do just at the front end, and I guess the purpose of the next 10 minutes is really to give you a little bit more understanding of the construct of micro-credentials and what we do in order to sort of create our micro-credentialing offer across the UK and in Scotland. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like, the range of programs that are on offer and the different ways in which people can access it, and indeed some of the discussions around the platforms as well. So as it's kind of been alluded to, we offer a range of fully standalone micro-credential programs, and that standalone piece is really critical for us. And have really been designed in partnership with industry to meet specific needs of both learners and businesses. And doing so in a sort of very proactive and reactive way as well, in terms of our speed to be able to sort of change and update programs as we move forward. As Tommy kind of alluded to, we deliver them through our online social learning platform, FutureLearn, which we helped co-develop and build a few years ago. And it really offers a flexible, short and a very CPD-focused set of solutions that help to quickly build in-demand skills and knowledge relevant to both individual learners, their career pathways, and indeed for the employers that they work for. Our micro-credential offer very much is centred around this sort of balancing act between the academic rigour that we undoubtedly bring as a university to these sorts of programmes, but also that workplace relevance and the changing skills needs that we are seeing across the industry. Or various industries. They are 100% delivered through online using the FutureLearn platform, and use a variety of learning materials, videos, quizzes, and indeed a final end of course assessment as part of that programme delivery. As Tommy's mentioned, you know, FutureLearn and that social learning piece is really, really important for us. And one of the things that is really critical to us and really important to us is the social interaction that comes within that platform for learners. So not only do they go through the learning themselves, but there's an opportunity for them to interact with other learners, and providing opportunities to really enhance their learning by sharing experiences, by building skills, gaining confidence, and sharing and growing their knowledge base with those on the programme as well. In terms of how we go about the development of these, all our micro-credentials have been developed with both the learner and the business in mind, and working through our faculty, engagement, research, partnership teams across the Open University estate. We work closely with our industry and union partners to identify skills that they expect and need within the workplace, and we develop a range of provision that sits behind that meets that requirement both now and indeed looking a bit further ahead in terms of the future workforce. As again, it's been mentioned a couple of times today as well, micro-credentials really are rapidly becoming quite a key consideration for both learners and businesses who are looking to learn and develop new skills quickly, and in turn being able to support businesses in their adaptation of changing trends or requirements within that workplace. I think one of our key successes with micro-credentials has also been the collaboration that we've had with our industry partners, where not only have they helped to inform the content by giving us insight to what the skills requirements are and what the current trends and fashions are within industry, but we've also taken that a stage further with a number of those partners, and where they've actually endorsed some of our micro-credentialing offer. And we've got partnerships with people like Cisco, who I'm sure you'll all know are world leader in IT, networking and cybersecurity, as well as Agile Business Consortium, Amazon Web Services as being a really good set of examples where those programs have been developed in partnership with them. And that importantly gives learners and businesses increased confidence that the programs that they're studying are relevant and have kudos and calibre in terms of what they're setting out to deliver. In terms of the framework, all our micro-credential programs adhere to what is referred to as the CMF, or the Common Micro-Credential Framework. And really broadly speaking, that means that all of our micro-credential programs extend for at least a 10 to 12 week program cycle. That individual learners are required to commit up to 10 to 13 hours of part-time study per week for each of those programs. And at the end point, the micro-credentials have a value of about 10 to 15 UK credits, and that will depend on whether that micro-credential sits at an undergraduate or an equivalent postgraduate level. And from the Open University perspective, all the credits that an individual gains as part of their micro-credential can then be used towards future Open University undergraduate or postgraduate level programs. And indeed, that can be extended further as well with other universities, albeit subject to the individual institution agreements that might sit behind that. But they have, academic rigor and a clear qualification mark that sits against them. In terms of our micro-credential offer, due to the popularity that we have now with our micro-credential suite, we now offer the opportunity for people to sign up to our micro-credential programs at 3 intake points through the year, so October, March and July are when we do our intakes, and we're just about to move towards the July intake. Now we've got some stuff coming out over the course of the next couple of weeks, starting to promote the next presentation, the next intake. From a cost perspective, they sit in a range of between £450 and £750 per course, and again that's very much determined across whether they're sitting at an undergraduate equivalent level or a postgraduate equivalent level. And for us just now, our focus is really around sort of 4 key areas: business leadership and management, computing and digital technologies, more so now, and particularly on the back of a lot of work that we've done around COP26, the environment, climate change and sustainability are really key focuses, and not just looking at it in terms of broad terms, but really what it means for individual businesses in terms of taking climate change and sustainability and transferring it into a way that can be adopted within the business. As it stands just now, we've got a suite of about 26 micro-credential programs. I will avoid the temptation of flashing all 26 of them up on the slide deck today, but there is a link, as you can see at the bottom of the screen there, that will take you to where all of our micro-credential offers are. But they range from things like project management, business management, finance for non-finance managers, through to Python programming, climate change, agile leadership, and even a program around photography as well. So there is a diverse range, and it's something that will continue to grow in terms of our offer. It's an area that is of sort of growing focus and importance for us at the Open University, and we are currently developing a range of new programs which we're hopeful will be launched later in the year. In terms of the different ways in which people can access micro-credentials, I guess the 2 obvious ones are that, from an individual learner point of view, you can self-fund yourself to go and undertake some micro-credential learning. You also have the option through employers and unions who quite often will step in with support, financial support, to help enable people to go on and do the learning. But we also have a number of funding streams that are available to us just now in Scotland that would allow individuals to also gain access to micro-credentials. The Upskill Fund really is for anybody over the age of 18 who's a resident in Scotland, who wants to come on and do a micro-credential that will help support the enhancement of their skills, career development, etc. Flexible Workforce Development Fund, slightly different. That one's aimed specifically at small to medium-sized businesses in Scotland who employ less than 250 people, and they can access up to £5,000 worth of training grant support that will allow employees to undertake training, micro-credentials being part of that offer, in areas such as business management, IT, digital, sustainability. The National Transition Training Fund, which is very much the Scottish Government's response to COVID, is a fund that's available to individuals who are either at risk of redundancy or going through redundancy, or have had to change role through some form of internal restructure and need some additional skills and training to enable them to fulfil that role. And then we've got the Community Learning and Development Fund, which is very much aimed at individuals who support education or community learning and development. And there's a range of now 5 programs that individuals can access that can support them in areas such as accessibility, inclusive learning, diversity, or embedding mental health into educational programs. And again, all of that information sits on our website. where you'll also find case studies, including one of a certain speaker today, Tommy, who is on there as well, is one of our sort of case study examples. So that's a very kind of brief run through of what micro-credentials are for the Open University, a little bit around the construct, and I'll quite happily hand back to Rachel now for any questions that people might have.
Thanks, David. Really useful. So if you've got any questions, folks, just pop them in the chat box. In the meantime, we've got a wee kind of 9-10 minutes for a couple of questions, but I just wanted to start off with a couple of questions to our speakers there. I guess online today, as part of the audience today, we've got quite a number of small companies that have shown interest in micro-credentials and that kind of learning, and it's something quite new. I guess I would like both speakers to comment on, you know, how, if I was a small to medium enterprise and interested in getting into micro-credentials and maybe developing or influencing some of that content from a staff, how would I go about that? What would be the kind of first steps into that micro-credential space? I'll maybe pass back to David first.
I can pick that one up first if you like. Yeah, sorry, can you still hear me?
Yeah, go for it, David.
Hello?
Go for it, David.
Hello? Yeah, sorry, I think it's maybe the connection this end that's gone a bit wobbly. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of different ways that small businesses in particular can engage. I think one of the pieces of work that I'm leading on just now is looking very carefully at our level of engagement and partnerships with things like trade bodies and trade associations and unions, chambers of commerce, to name but a few, where there's an opportunity for smaller businesses to feed into a bigger discussion and narrative around, you know, what future skills demands or even current skills gaps are, and how we can use things like micro-credentials as a way to very quickly plug that gap and give that short, sharp intervention that a lot of organisations and individuals need, and in particular within SMEs, where, you know, we fully recognise, and it's an area I've worked in very closely over a number of years, not just with the Open University. You know, small businesses are time, resource and time poor. So when it comes to training and it comes to development, that short, sharp intervention is the way to go. They don't have the time, the resource, or even the financial capability to put people through formal long-term qualifications. They just want snapshots. And really that's where the micro-credential comes into its own, because in essence they are snapshots of what potentially could be larger programs of study. So by engaging in sort of trade bodies, trade associations through their local chamber, or even just coming directly to organisations like the Open University and banging on the door saying, look, you know what, we have this need, we have this demand, is this something that is in the pipeline for development? If it's not, you know, is this something you could look at? And if we feel that there's a genuine and justifiable opportunity, then we will definitely explore it. That's what we're about, is to provide, you know, solutions to businesses.
Thanks, David. Anything to add on that, Tommy, from your experience?
Yeah, perhaps be more about accessibility of the micro-credentials. So now we've got the micro-credentials, how do we access it and deliver that within the workplace type of context, you know, and it's making it as accessible as possible. So thinking of that, turning a room into a classroom within the workplace and giving people the adequate release and reaching the agreement. I know a lot of small, medium enterprises won't have union recognition, but where there is engaging with the union to support the learners through a successful completion. I think it's really important. The first cohort I was referring to earlier on of 4, yeah, the employers there are all quite small employers in terms of the number of workers that are employed there. So it's definitely possible that we can take micro-credentials forward within small workplaces.
Okay, thanks, Tommy. And I think there's a comment here from Robert that kind of leads on from some of that, and it says, can an education provider work with an industry partner stakeholder group to create new micro-credentials to fulfill a need of employers? If so, what's the approach? I think probably David and Tommy touched on that a little bit. I can kind of comment from an NMIS perspective, certainly within the manufacturing side. We work, as you'll see, our own micro-credentials course. We're working with Strathclyde to develop content within digital manufacturing to net zero. Now, the reason for that content was brought about by an industry need, and maybe not from an individual partner, but certainly from certain areas of the industry kind of pointed in that need for that digital development piece. So that very much did come from industry input, and it's now an education provider that's providing that. And things are changing. I mean, certainly, you know, almost all universities and colleges are now realizing, you know, there has to be that link between the industry side and the academic side, and also that we have to be much more flexible and actually respond to employer requirements. And it's certainly a very high level from the Scottish Government and from Scottish Funding Council is that want to flip it around, in the fact that, you know, learning should be both student centric and also meet the needs of industry, not necessarily just what the institution's good at delivering. So that's very much part of what we're doing at NMIS. And from the micro-credentials piece, we have been working with as the industry partners, but we've also been working with industry bodies as well, in particular key growth areas as well within Scotland, to identify some of those needs within those areas and start building training, including micro-credentials around that as well. Okay, so I think we've got a couple of minutes. Just one last question, I think, for both David and Tommy, is obviously certainly within manufacturing and some other industries as well, quite a lot of the training has a practical element, you know, and there's that kind of practical training piece that kind of really needs to be done in person. Where do you see micro-credentials fitting in that piece of that more vocational training, I guess? Tommy, maybe you first this time.
Yeah, I think micro-credentials are only going to grow. You know, I talked about non-contextualised. There's the door, of course. I'll just ignore it. Talked about non-contextualised learning through and accrediting that through things like the Adult Achievement Award and, you know, making your learning count. These are really important. So I think there's demand out there from potential learners really to further develop their skills in a very relevant way. And I think relevance is always going to be key. You know, so when we're working with learners, they're always thinking about, why should I do that? And that's not why should I throw away kind of, you know, it's what's the purpose behind this? How is this going to benefit me? How's it going to benefit me within the context of not only my working life, but something beyond my working life as well? So yeah, I think there can be the ties in between the kind of idea and the concept around vocational learning as well as the academic thing. I'm also a fan of learning for the sake of learning. I wouldn't dismiss, you know, I've studied a lot of courses at night school that I'll never use. I studied hieroglyphics. I'll never use that in a workplace context. So I'd just be a bit cautious about moving away and having something that is only about what you can utilise within your workplace, because learning's far more important than that.
Okay, thanks, Tommy. And anything to add on that, David?
Yeah, I think slightly. I mean, just, you know, from our perspective, obviously the Open University is slightly different to your more sort of traditional brick universities and colleges, in the sense of the majority of our provision is obviously done through distance learning and online learning. So that doesn't necessarily preclude us from that vocational space in terms of, you know, taking learnings that you're doing through a distance learning programming and applying it back into the workplace. But it does have some limitation in terms of, you know, we can't, you know, necessarily get involved in, you know, programs that are, you know, about welding or something like that, because you can't really do that in the comfort of your front living room. But yeah, I mean, I think that vocational space is really, really important. And I think businesses and individuals are really seeing the value in terms of being able to marry that formal educational piece up with the kind of real practical realities of what that means within their kind of working environment. And I think anything that we can do to enhance that space and enhance the quality of provision and offer and the range of that offer, from everything from, you know, very low level qualifications or standalone programs through to things that lead to more formal higher education achievement is definitely to be encouraged. And, you know, micro-credentials definitely, you know, fit very comfortably into that growth in that space. So. Great,
thanks, David. I think my experience of working previously in the science sector is that, which was heavily practical, was that by doing the micro-credentials or the online learning piece, yes, it didn't teach you all the skills, but accelerated that particularly onboarding process when someone was starting out in a new lab or a new scientific area. Having done that pre-work kind of accelerated the learning in the lab. So I think we've hit.
Rachel, sorry, could I just we've got Dennis Fallon in the chat box, and also Soma Gossel, and who's got her hand up. I think she had her hand up early. Sorry.
Sure. So what's Dennis saying? RMT union engage with employers to fill skill gaps and offer opportunities for workers to develop within work and social development. Okay. So again, that's that skill, working with employers to get that feedback on what those skills gaps are. And where's struggling to see the hand up piece. Soma, were you want to add anything?
I can unmute Soma if you like, so she can speak.
Please, thanks.
Like, that's you, Soma. Perhaps it was an accident. They are.
That's fine. Yeah, no worries. I say we're kind of close to we're at the end of our session today, but Soma, please feel free to drop us a note if there's a particular query or question that you wanted to ask earlier on in the session there. So I would just like to kind of finalise and say that the micro-credentials piece is something that NMIS and obviously our partners here as well, very interested in a way of widening that accessibility piece, both geographically and across all types of workers as well, and can see a real strength in that area. And I think, I say, the take-home piece is it's something that's developing across the board, and I think you'll see more and more of it. It's making sure that it gets that acknowledgement as well from other institutions, that it is, it's credited good learning, but also not to forget the fact that we can't just put it online and then just hope that it works. It has to be this kind of social structure and this learning structure around the micro-credentials as well. So I would just like to close by thanking our two speakers. Thanks to Tommy and David for their time today, and thank you for the questions. Again, the session will be up on YouTube, and more than happy to share any content and our contact details as well if you want to find out any more about anything that's been discussed today. So I'll just say thank you very much, folks.
That's great. Thanks very much, Rachel. And just to reiterate, thanks very much to Tommy and David for